Continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present Jenifer Barker. Jenifer has been in the position of Deputy Archivist for Warren County, Ohio Record Center and Archives since 2015. Prior to this position, she received her BA in History from the Miami University and her MA in Public History from Wright State University. As part of her position as Deputy Archivist, she has implemented many public outreach initiatives, including K-12 programming, social media, and numerous presentations highlighting the work being done in Warren County. Today's presentation will provide an overview of the Warren County Record Center and Archives. She will be walking everyone through how to conduct research at Warren County by covering topics such as independent online research, in-person research, and a walkthrough of additional outside resources to maximize your research capabilities. So without further ado, I would like to offer a warm virtual welcome to Jenifer.
Thank you so much for having me today. So as Suzanne said, I was just going to provide a general overview of the Warren County Record Center and Archives, some of the things that we do here at the archives, some of the services that we provide to the county departments, and also outside researchers and patrons. So I imagine a lot of you have a lot more experience with genealogy than I do, but what I've gotten really good at since 2015 is learning how to utilize our specific records and then some other local resources along with online resources to help maximize your research if you have ancestors from this area. So just a little bit of background on myself. Like Suzanne said, I received my BA in history from Miami University here in Ohio, and then my MA from Wright State University in public history, which is an archives and museum management program. I've been here since 2015. Prior to that, I did not have any practical knowledge of archives, and I had never worked in an archives before, so this is my first position. Here at the Warren County Record Center and Archives, our main goal is to serve the public through protecting the records preservation and providing as much access to those records as possible. We have two separate divisions within our department. So we have an imaging and microfilming department where we image and microfilm for the county. And then we also have the archives and then records management for the entire county. So just a little bit of background about Warren County. So we have been a county since about 2 months after Ohio became a state. So May of 1803. Our records date back to 1803, and they go up through about the early 1900s that we have access to in the archives. And then anything that's newer than the early 1900s, you would reach out to the various departments within the county. So as I said, we don't only just provide records for patrons. Some of the other responsibilities that we have within our department are to provide records and information management for all of the Warren County departments. So the woman that you see in this picture in the green top, that's my boss. So she is the records manager and also an archivist within our department. So she writes up all of our records management policies, and I'll get into that a little bit more. In addition to that, we are also in charge of records destruction and disposition. So we are in charge of whether we keep or destroy records. Like I said, we have a microfilm and imaging department. We're also in charge of delivering and storing boxes for the county. So we, in addition to historic records, we also store newer records for the county that the departments aren't using on a daily basis. One of our largest initiatives since I started at Warren County is to make sure we are maximizing the preservation of historic county records. And we do that through various projects as far as preservation, and then as far as processing some older collections that might not be stored in optimal situations, giving access to the public and performing outreach within the community. and then providing records to the public upon request. So for our records management program, my boss actually has written up over 45 county retention schedules within each department. We are also working with other departments to create county policies as far as records management, and then also training our various departments on best records management keeping policies. This is a huge part of what we do in our department to make sure that going forward that the county is properly maintaining their records, whether that means properly maintaining them within their offices, storage, or whether that means that once they've hit their retention period that they are disposing of records, so we don't end up with massive amounts of records that we aren't required to keep. So this is just an example of some of the records destruction and disposition that we've done within the county to try to help maintain the current records. So we've done special media disposal of obsolete records, and all of this falls under the state laws. So, you know, we make sure that everything is processed correctly. And then we've done some special media destruction on site for some of the various departments that might not have had good records keeping throughout their history. So for instance, the picture on the right, our Board of Disabilities, they hadn't had anyone in that position to really do proper records management. So we did a huge shred for them to make sure that, you know, what they had is what they needed to keep going forward. In addition to records management, we microfilm an image for the county. So we've been doing this since 1992. Microfilm is becoming quickly extinct for a lot of places, but while we are digitizing the images for various departments within the county, we are also creating the microfilm backups. We keep one of those on site, and then we have one, the originals off site in a storage location for disaster purposes. So we have the capabilities of scanning anything from historic images on a flatbed scanner. We have high capacity scanners that can scan multiple pages at a time. And then we also have a large format scanner that we've been scanning oversized historic records. This is a huge part of records preservation into the future, and also being able to provide access to the public. So for my particular part of my job, I've been working on scanning a lot, which we will get into a little bit later into the presentation of all the various projects that we've taken on for the historic records and providing access to those. And then, as I said, we actually store records, not just that are historic. So I don't know how a lot of counties in your state do this, but each county in Ohio has different policies and different storage methods on what they do and do not store. So for our particular record center, we store historic records that date back to 1803, but we also store, like I said, any newer records that the county is not currently using on a daily basis, which leads us to also providing those files to the various departments whenever they need them. So for instance, one of the largest records requests that we receive, there were new driver's license requirements. So we get a lot of requests for marriage records or divorce decrees. So we actually have a person that will deliver those files to our court system for people. So this is just a picture of our storage area. That is one very small area within the back. This says we have enough storage capability for 20,000 cubic feet. I would say the historic stuff that we store for the county probably only touches about maybe a third of that, and the majority of it are newer records, and by newer, usually about 100 years or newer than that. So we've done various preservation projects with the rest of the county. So not only are we trying to preserve the records that are stored in our archives, so prior to 2001, when our building was built, All of these records that we store were just stored in various locations throughout the county, and there was no actual central location for the majority of our records. So prior to that, the storage methods, unfortunately, were just not optimal. Once our department was created in 2001, that's when all the departments decided, or they gave the Record Center all of their records that were historic. So thankfully, since 2001, we've had the majority of all the historic records for the county in one central location. That helps a lot with maintaining the integrity of these records. So I mentioned that we've done a lot of processing projects. So the picture on the right-hand side, this is where we are taking records that had previously been folded up and put into non-archival safe folders and also non-archival safe boxes. So we will take those records, unfold them, take all of the metal out of them, and then we will flatten them as well as possible and then put them in archival safe storage boxes and folders so that they will stay, they'll maintain their integrity for as long as possible. In addition to processing these records, we also make sure that the storage, the temperature, and the relative humidity within the archives is maintained on a daily basis so that the environment that these records are in is the optimum environment. The majority of stuff that we have at the archives are paper documents or books. So they thankfully have about the same, they need about the same temperature and relative humidity. Some of the other projects that we've done is we are working with our facilities department to help maintain our historic buildings. So the picture on the left is a project that we worked on with our facilities department. This is Lady Justice at the top of our old courthouse. And prior to this installation, she was in extreme disrepair. At some point, the county approved people shooting pigeons that were taking over the courthouse in the early 1900s. So she was missing her scales and her sword, and she had bullet holes in her, and her paint was fading. So we have worked really closely with our facilities department to try to do various projects within the county to help maintain our historic buildings. So whether that be just providing background or providing histories on these buildings, with this particular one, we help them research what she would have looked like when they first installed her. And then the other project that we have tried to do is we've hired outside conservators to help keep some of our, probably our more prominent oversized materials and actually do some conservation work on them that we are not able to do in-house. So for instance, this is a framed picture of one of our archival drawings, or I'm sorry, one of our building drawings that we had deacidified and then framed so that people can look at it. So those are all things that I work with the rest of my coworkers on within the archival department, but my job in particular as the deputy archivist is mainly to do outreach within the community, whether that be through exhibits that we do. So we hire an intern every summer and we try to do an exhibit where we can utilize our historic records to really showcase how you can do research in an archives. So we always pick something that we have a lot of archival records that can help highlight that. We do community shred days, so we make sure that we help other people within the community maintain their records as well. And then we do have a reading room that's open to the public Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. So we try to be as open and accessible as possible. And then I also mentioned that I do a K through 12 educational outreach program. So I actually go out into the local schools and do, I pretty much do a little bit like what I'm doing now, where I try to teach the students about archives. I feel like when I was coming up in school that there was no emphasis on utilizing an archives for research. So I would like the students in Warren County to recognize that these archives exist everywhere, whether you want to do local history research or even if you wanted to research. So for instance, at Wright State University, they have one of the largest Wright Brothers collections of their private collections. So if you want to do research on a topic such as that, so just raising awareness on archives and how they can be utilized by students for their future. And then finally, the other part of my job and the reason that I'm speaking to you today is I help other people do research. So when I first took this position, I had almost no experience with government records. So I started out very fresh and I pretty much have been learning every day, and every patron that I deal with, I learn something new. A lot of these records at various locations within the country or in the counties, they're not easily accessible. And when I started working here, my boss, so she actually started a couple years before me, but one of her main objectives was to make sure that we are working on getting as much information out, whether that be online or just within the community. So just making sure that we are doing as much, providing as much accessibility to our records as possible. So for instance, one of the ways that you can conduct research, I guess first actually I'll talk about the researchers that we help the most. So we have helped a lot of researchers that send in, so you can send in a web request, and I'm the person that will answer that web request. So if you go onto our website, which I'll be walking you through shortly, you can submit a records request for something that you think we might have. Or you can come into our reading room. That's another way, and this is a picture of our reading room that you can do research. So we primarily help people look for genealogy connections, whether that be genealogy for their families or maybe other families. The other thing that we get a lot of are people requesting house histories. So I know Suzanne mentioned there was a house history webinar, which I could probably benefit from because it's really difficult to narrow down exactly when structures were built, especially if they were in the 1800s. So those are the two primary people that we help the most with research. So like I said, you can submit a records request and I'm the person that will answer that. You can call us or you can come in person. And as I said, one of the main objectives that my boss had for the Record Center was providing accessibility, because even if you submit a records request, you could just be sending it without really knowing whether that record will exist. Or even if you make the trip into the Record Center, it might be really difficult to know whether we are going to have what you're looking for or not. So one of the ways that we've tried to alleviate some of that, some of the unknown for our patrons is anytime that we are processing any of our collections, we try to create indexes. So I'm just going to assume that people don't have a full understanding of what a county archives might hold within their collection. So I'll just go through what we have at the archives really quick and some of the records that you can access through us. So for genealogy, some of the things that some of the records that we have that are the most helpful. So we have probate estate records, and we have something that are called old common pleas. So the probate court didn't start until the 1850s. So our oldest historic records that are estates or will records, those date back to 1803. So we essentially have a complete collection of the majority of our historic records, which is amazing, and they're all in one location. So they're pretty easy to access if you know what you're looking for. So we have probate estate records. We have all of the court records, whether those be the court transcripts or the actual court packets dating back to 1803 up through the early 1900s. We also have, so in Ohio, in Ohio, birth and death records were not required to be kept until 1867. So we have birth and death records dating from 1867 through 1908. We also have the marriage records for Warren County dating back to 1803. We have the will records, which the estate and will records kind of work hand in hand. And then some other documents that we have. So we have auditor tax duplicates, which if you want to narrow down the search of where your ancestor may have lived within Warren County, those are one of the records that you can use. For our exhibits, when we are trying to find information on like our county buildings and stuff, we utilize the commissioner's journals. And I like to compare the commissioner's journals to the approval or denial of anything official that happened within the county, is how I describe it to the school students. But those are full of information about the county in general. But let's say if your ancestor ever worked for Warren County, that's one of the records that you can look at to find them. Some of the other useful records that we have that aren't obviously apparent at first are we have historic maps of the county. And because Warren County was so rural back in the 1800s and early 1900s, a lot of the people who lived here owned some acreage. So a lot of the historic maps that we have can really narrow down where your ancestor may have lived. So that's general, the general list of records that we hold for Warren County. And then I would like to walk you through our website, which I believe is how Suzanne found us to start with. Oh, let me back out of this really quick. Okay, so as I said, one of our biggest initiatives since I started in 2015 is to try to provide as much access to our records as possible. And because a lot of these records, because they exist in historic paper forms, are not easy to access if you can't come into the archives. So just a little bit of background. These are some of the exhibits that we've created to help tell the history of Warren County. We do have a link at the bottom where you can request records. I will say when you do that records request, you have to know a name and a roundabout date that you think that your ancestors would have been in Warren County. And if you have that information, honestly, that's really all I need to actually help you try to find stuff. We are also on Facebook and WordPress. We have a blog. So if you're interested in learning more about our records and some of the interesting things we find, or even we share a lot of community stuff for other archives in the area, I encourage you to go out and follow our page. And then we also have a list of our available records. So I'm going to click on that just so you can see kind of an idea of the various departments that we hold records for. If you click on each one of these, it will give you a listing of what we hold. And a lot of this lists not only the historic stuff that we have, but even some of the newer stuff that you can request from the county. So in that, if you click each one of these, it will give you an idea of what we have. But the most important part about our website is the county indexes. So if you click at the available records at the top and click on our county indexes, basically what we have tried to do every time we process any collection of our records, we want to create an index that is searchable for our patrons. And as I said, this is just an extra level of access that we can provide and empower people that are searching for their ancestors to utilize prior to ever having to reach out to us. So as opposed to just, like I said, submitting a records request and hoping that you've got the right dates, or that maybe your ancestor may have lived in Warren County at that time, we try to create as many indexes for these records as possible so that you know exactly what you're looking for prior to even reaching out to us. But as I said, even if you have a name and a roundabout date, that's enough information for me to be able to use to help you find what you're looking for. So I'm going to walk you through what we've managed to put on here and why it's important. So first of all, the commissioners, what we've done is we have indexed the county commissioners index. So we have not yet put the images for this particular one online, but as you can see, we basically went through each volume of indexes for the commissioner's journals, and we created a searchable index because prior to this, the only way to look up information in these books was to actually thumb through the paper book index, which is painful, and honestly, sometimes it's not super fruitful. So our goal is to eventually get the corresponding pages that these people or these topics show up. So you can actually search. If you search in here, for instance, I'll search one of the families. So you can look up stuff such as bridges, or you can look up roads. You can look up people, people who contracted with the county. These are one of the largest collections of telling the general county history that we have in our archives. So these are the books that we utilize the most to help tell the stories that we include in our exhibits. So even if these don't necessarily tie you straight back to your family, if you wanted to do any kind of general history on Warren County, these commissioners' journals, they're invaluable to our history. Unfortunately, I will tell you though, sometime over the years, volumes 1 through 3 have gone missing. So that is extremely unfortunate considering that was the start of the county. So I imagine it has a lot of really important information in them, and hopefully they're safe somewhere out there and they did not get destroyed. So another way in which you can really access a lot of genealogical information is through court documents. People in Warren County in the early 1800s were extremely litigious, and they like to take everything to court. It seems like a lot of our families, you'll see the same names pop up in a lot of these records. So I'm just going to walk you through these really quick. So one of the records that we were able to digitize is something called the Black and Mulatto Record Book. And this record book, anytime that free Black people would come up north, they would have to register. So this is an invaluable book to people wanting to research their ancestors. So we were actually able to, so we tried to transcribe everything that was included, any of the people's names included in their various entries. So this is an example of one of the records, and it gives a lot of information. A lot of them include information such as, a lot of them include information as to prior owners, if they were freed, whether they were a freed person. A lot of these give physical descriptions as well. So we wanted to make sure that we got these records online just because they're really difficult to access, which difficult to access records seems to be a theme. So some of the other things that we have digitized are anytime we process any of our court documents, we try to include those indexes on here so you can research them. We've done a few various smaller collections that we've processed, such as this records of marriage certificates. I did a big project where I transcribed one of our general court indexes that spans the time from 1803 to 1870. Some of these we've not managed to digitize the pages, but we do have the transcriptions. So, and like I said, these are all searchable. So if you have a family member that you think may have been here, even if they, so for instance, if you want to look up the probate estate records, we will only have those for people who died in Warren County. So we wouldn't have those for anyone who just spent time here during their life. So one of the good ways, or one of the ways that you can try to locate your ancestor is by looking through these court records. Because even if they tried to get maybe like $5 that was owed to them and they went to court, that sort of information would be included in this. So these court records, if you would like to try to find your ancestors, are a great way to narrow down a time frame that they may have been in Warren County. We also, because we don't have death records that predate 1867, we were able to digitize, or we were able to, put our index for processing coroner inquests, which prior to police doing investigations on such things as murders, in Warren County, our coroner would be the person who would conduct those investigations. But if you're looking for one of your ancestors that may have died in Warren County, this is a great resource to look up, because like I said, these ones predate that 1867 date. So we might have information on when they died. I know if you're trying to put exact numbers on them, they can be really hard to find in Ohio in general, unless you have some sort of family Bible or some sort of church record or some reliable cemetery record. So this is one of the records that you can use to narrow down a death date. So we have put some of the information about our aerial photographs. This has more to do with if you were doing research on a particular portion of Warren County. So we've included the inventory of oversized materials that we have. Eventually, we will also have the images to accompany that. And then our probate court. So this is where a lot of our genealogical records reside. So during the pandemic, when we were working from home, one of the projects that we worked on was we created indexes for our birth and death records. So all of the birth and death records that our department holds is now on our website. So they are searchable. Get it to come up. So they are searchable by any of this information. So you can just type in whatever information you are looking for. I keep typing in Corwin because that's one of our more prominent families, but you can actually see the person's name, what their birth year was, and then you can view the entire page for those birth records. And a lot of these exist for Warren County that various other institutions have scanned for us, but we wanted to have, high quality images for people to be able to look at, because sometimes the images that have been scanned in the past for Warren County are in black and white, and they're just really grainy and really hard to see. So one of the things that we've tried to do is to actually put, high resolution color photographs or images on there so that they're easier to read. So you can go through the various birth records and then the death records. And as I said, those date from 1867 through 1908. So anything that's after 1908, you would have to get from the health department. And I do believe there is a fee to that. One of the other really cool things that we tried to do is to, so we created a naturalization index for all so within Warren County, you could record your naturalization information at any court that would record information. So we do have a small collection of these that are all in the same location. We also know that we have a large collection of these that are dispersed through some of our court records. So what we have digitized so far are just the records that are combined and in one place. So if you have a relative that immigrated from a different country, this is a great resource for you to try to see if they may have processed their naturalization paperwork in Warren County. So in addition to putting the index that's searchable on here, we also included the documents. And in addition to these providing a lot of background information, some of them also, they provide a physical description of people, and then they also will sometimes provide an occupation. But if you are doing any of your genealogical research overseas, these will clearly give you a really good head start on where your ancestors may have traveled during their time to get to the United States. So like I said, these are just the collection of the ones that were easily found. I know going forward, one of my future projects is to go through our other various court records and try to scan and document any of the ones that are just included within the normal court documents. And we are constantly updating our website. So anytime that we update anything on the website, we will also share that information on our Facebook page. So that's the best place to get information on what's current. One of the other, so for genealogical purposes, one of the best ways for you to connect your ancestors, maybe to their children or whoever, just trying to find those familial ties. These, I'm sorry, I scrolled down. These Old Common Pleas estate packets that I mentioned earlier, these are one of the best records that we have in the archives, and they are generally the first ones that I will try to access for people and their ancestors. So if you gave me a name and then you gave me a date that you think your ancestor was in Warren County, these ones are generally the ones that I would start with, because they will include not only the person's name, the roundabout year that they processed the estate packet, which is usually indicative of when your ancestor died, but also, like I said, they will list anyone that they are leaving any of their money or property to, and they will usually have their relationship to the person whose estate packet it is. There also, if there is a will record that exists, will generally be in these estate packets. So one of the projects I'm finishing up is we scanned all of the earliest ones, so dating from 1803 up through, I think, the 1840s. We will have not only the names of those people, but we also have their entire their entire estate packets accessible for you to research on your own. And as I said, the reason that we wanted to prioritize this is because these records are really difficult to get a hold of. And while we will, so if you request records from us, we can provide those by copying these documents for you and then mailing them, which we do charge just the copy fee and then the amount to mail them. But one of the other ways that we've been trying to help people access stuff is we will digitize records and email them. The issue that we run into with these particular types of records is that, as you can see here, there are 81 of these little pieces of paper. So when you're trying to email those to a patron, they're unfortunately just too large. So, but like I said, one of the things that we have been working really hard on is providing these online so that you can just access them, and you can download these or print them if you would like. So we have those done. As I said, I'm finishing up this project, which I started in 2015. where we will have all of our oldest records at least digitized and online for you to view. And even if you run into one of these that are from the later time period, let's see if I can. So some of these are past that time period and we would not have a document available. If that's the situation, you can always request it from us and we can, as I said, scan it or print it and mail it to you. And then we also have, so those were the old common pleas. So as I said earlier, our probate court was not established until the 1850s. So anything listed as old common pleas would be those 1803 to the mid 1850s. And then anything after that is part of our probate estates. So we've done a similar situation. We are not digitizing these ones yet because we have hundreds and hundreds of boxes of these. So that's not something we have on our to-do list as of right now. But as we said, we made them searchable so that if you did want something and you requested it from us, we would be able to provide that for you. So one of the only historic records for the county that our department does not hold are the historic deed records. Those are still utilized on a daily basis by various real estate or assessors. So those are located within our recorder's office. One of the projects that I worked on over the summer, we transcribed one of the deed indexes. So we will make it accessible to search whether we have a deed in the county. And if that's the case, we can provide that deed for you. But one of the other things that we've utilized from the recorder's office is this Veterans Gravesite Index. And this is being kept up to date to now. So this not only provides gravesite information for veterans from the 1800s, but it also, like I said, is still being updated. So this is another tool that you could possibly use to conduct research on your ancestors. Does anybody have any questions so far? Hopefully I'm not going too fast through these.
No, not so far.
Okay, great. And I was just going to walk you through some of the ways that I do research when I receive research requests. And I'll go back to this really quick. So as I said, those are some of our indexes and some of the documents that we've managed to scan and digitize up to this point. Once I receive a records request, like I said, usually if I have a name or dates, that is a great jumping off point to try to figure out what records we have. And I will generally start with the estate packets. If your relative died here, those are useful. And then I will generally travel from that to something like our court records or even our birth and death records. Now, what I just showed you is a great way that you can do research ahead of time before reaching out to us to establish the existence of your ancestor in Warren County. I provided a handout. So these are the resources that I like to go through to help other people do research. I personally, because I know how hard genealogy can be to find stuff, I like to try to do a little bit of research myself for other people before I start sending them off into the great wide world of genealogy. I'm guessing that a lot of you have a lot of experience in doing this, but what I found are a lot of the people reaching out to us, they don't have a lot of that background information. So the more I can help them, the better I feel, because I really enjoy doing research. So this is a list of, so I included our contact information, and usually after we've provided our various resources to you, I will send people to the Warren County Genealogical Society. They are an all volunteer-based group. They are actually located in the office next door to us. So we work really closely with them, and they are a group of volunteers that are just amazing. They work really hard to help people. They have a lot of resources that are not official records versus, so for us, we're limited in the amount of information we can provide because we only have official county records, versus their genealogical society. Anytime anyone has done a project within their group, they create various family folders. So if they've already had someone doing research on one of your ancestors, there's a really great chance that they already have an existing file on that family. One of the things that they do is they have a first families. So that is a group of people who had ancestors that were the first settlers here in Warren County. We had a lot of people that settled in this area in the late 1700s through the early 1800s. So they have an entire group of people. I'm going to walk you through their website also really quick. I apologize for bouncing back and forth, but I like to show what I'm explaining. So this is their website, which I've included in that handout. But they have been around a lot longer than our record center and archives. So this group has been doing historic research for families in Warren County much longer than we've been established. So they actually have a lot of, they've created a lot of their own online indexes, which you can see here. One of the things that they do really well is they have a lot of people that are well versed in cemetery research. So if they've done a lot of stuff for those local cemeteries that might be on someone's private property. So they've done a lot of work on trying to collect that information for the various cemeteries within Warren County. So they're a great resource for finding information such as that. They also have done a lot of indexing for some of our records as well. And honestly, some of the indexing that they have in their actual library on site is better than the indexing we've been able to get to in the time that we've been working towards that. So they're always the second step into doing genealogical research in Warren County that I send people to. So I'll just give you an idea. So if you go to the vital records for our marriages, we are just now starting to put these together and to put them on our website. But because they've been doing this for so much longer, they created their own indexes for our marriage records. So this is a great place to start as well if you wanted to research information at the archives or within Warren County. And you can see they kind of have it broken down by, so these are the volumes that we have at the archives. We do have at our archives the marriage records that date all the way up to 1975, I believe, is when the cutoff is prior to Social Security numbers. So we do have a little bit more in our archives than they have on here. But this is a great way to do that research at home without actually having to go out or even to request it in Warren County. The next one that I wanted to show you is the Warren County Historical Society. They do a lot less genealogy stuff for Warren County, but they have a lot more historical items, if that makes sense. So they're not necessarily, they're not set up well to help people do research as the Genealogical Society is or as our Record Center is. But what the Historical Society does is they have had a lot of families over the history of Warren County donate personal private collections to their facility. So I always encourage people to try to reach out to them. As I said, they're not necessarily a research-based historical society. So that's kind of just something that they do in addition to providing history about Warren County, but they do have a significant collection of local family private collections. So it's always something I like to direct people to. Their staff is extremely helpful, and they know a lot about Warren County and a lot about the families that have lived here. So that's always one of the places I like to send people to, or I will reach out to them on your behalf. The next one that I utilize and that I send other people to. So our organization is part of something called HAC, which is the Heritage Advisory Council. If you go to the website that I provided, it will give you a list of the various local historical societies or museums in Warren County. And these are all, if you know within Warren County where your ancestor lived, you can reach out to any of these places, and there's a good possibility that they will be able to help you, or they will have materials that would help further your research. And if you click on any of them, it will provide you with their address and then a phone number, usually email, and then if they have a website or a Facebook page. So this is one that I encourage people to utilize because we only have historic records for Warren County, the actual county government. So these various local historical societies, they've inherited maybe like local township records or even local city records that the cities just didn't know what to do with. So there's a great chance that they would have a lot more information than what we would be able to provide. So those are the bulk of the local organizations that would help support your genealogical research. What I want to get into next is some online historic resources that we use to help tell the history of Warren County. So this first link, which is an online book, this is a history written about Warren County that was published in 1882. We call it the Beers History. But the great thing about this particular book is there's a lot of family information listed in this particular volume, and it gives a lot of historic background on the families themselves. It also gives background on Warren County as a county, the local townships. It has information about schools, and then you can search through it. So it is a searchable resource, but it might also help connect family ties that you're looking for. So there's a lot of the times that there's been historic research done on citizens that lived in Warren County, but in addition to that, they will also provide information about their parents and where their parents lived prior to moving to Warren County or where they were born. And a lot of the times it will provide dates. So we have a physical copy of this here in the archives, but it's a lot easier clearly to be able to utilize the online search tool. And then, so this is the Lebanon Western Star was the largest newspaper for Warren County up through really the 2000s. It was called something else recently, but one of the projects that we actually had a donor, Warren County had a donor donate a whole bunch of money to digitize these newspapers and put them online. So if you wanted to research any of your ancestors within the newspapers for Warren County, you can utilize this particular website. There's an advanced search option. These can be a little tedious to search through, so I will warn you ahead of time, but it is searchable, and then you can actually look at the papers themselves. So this is hosted by the Ohio History Connection, but the newspapers were accessed through the Warren County Genealogical Society. And if you reach out to the Warren County Genealogical Society, they also have a large collection of other local newspapers on microfilm. So another online resource that we utilize a lot is the Ohio History Connection. They have a large online catalog of photographs and various information on Warren County, people in Warren County. So you can search their information on here if you wanted to see if they had more information about your ancestors. So anything that was required to be a state record, they would have information about that. They have a lot of information on the state penitentiary. And then, like I said, various things that have been donated to the Ohio History Connection through the years. They would also have, they've digitized a lot of stuff through them. And then the last thing that we use here a lot is Find a Grave, which I'm assuming most of you have some kind of information or have utilized this before. So we utilize this a lot to try to narrow down maybe when people have died and when they were born, and sometimes we can find those family connections through there as well. So as I said, I really wanted to just share some of the resources that we utilize here at the archives, because we are limited to just county government records, which hold a lot of information, but we always like to combine our records with some of the information of these other various entities. So hopefully you will find this list extremely helpful. In addition, of course, if you have access to Ancestry, that's always a great place to start as well. And I'm sure that you know of a lot of other outside resources that are not specific to Warren County that would help as well. So yeah, that is basically what it's like to do research here. I like walking people through our website to show them all of the various documents and indexes and stuff we've created to help you be able to empower yourselves to do some research on your own without just having to utilize us. So with that, does anybody have any questions for me?
Hey, class, go ahead and unmute your microphone and go ahead and ask Jenifer any question you have directly. And we'll wait a few moments. And while we're waiting for someone to unmute their microphone, Jenifer, first of all, I got to tell you, as a librarian, I remember when I was going through and getting my degree, you could always tell the people who were in archives because, they'd be in groups, with like all these different artifacts, and they're like trying to figure out the best way to preserve them. And it's a fascinating field of study. I can understand that's why you chose to go into it, because as a librarian, I find it extremely fascinating. But I saw something on one of your first slides that said deacidification. Now, I'm familiar with, do no harm, wrap in acid-free paper, that kind of thing. But what exactly does it mean by deacidification?
So we, as archivists, don't have any background in conservation. That is not something our program went over. But that particular, I think it was like one of our drawings of our buildings, the material that it is on is just extremely acidic. So I believe it's a spray that they spray on it that kind of tries to neutralize it a little bit so that it will, so over time it does not break down, especially being inside that picture frame. It's a little bit honestly out of my depth because I don't have a background in conservation, but we have a local professional conservation group that we utilize that does all that work for us.
Wow, like I said, I find that extremely fascinating.
Yeah, so it's just trying to neutralize, which when we put stuff into the archival safe folders and boxes and stuff, it's essentially doing the same thing, just try to minimize future damage to those documents.
Excellent. Okay, class, anybody have a question? Go ahead and unmute your microphone. Okay, well, we're waiting for people to come up with questions. You mentioned a community shred day. I got to applaud you for that, because every time I've ever had a lot of shredding to do, I have to hire a private company to come to my house with these big shredding machines, and they throw the whole box into the machine at one time, and it costs quite a bit of money. So kudos to your department for actually doing that for the community for free. That's wonderful. And then you mentioned, we were talking briefly about house research. I wanted to mention to the class that if that's something that you're interested in, our library does have several really good books on that topic. And if that's something you're interested in, then please do let me know, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with those books. Let's see here. Jean put into the chat box that she looked it up. Deacidification spray safely and effectively neutralizes acids in paper to increase the lifespan of books and documents. The spray's magnesium oxide neutralizes acid, leaving an alkaline reserve permanently fixed in the cellulose fibers. So thank you for that information. And Diana said to everybody, my state archives also uses some kind of spray that minimizes the acidity of paper. So you've caught some attention here of some of the class. Let's see here. Any other questions? Let's see here. You mentioned, Jenifer, you mentioned restrictions on, you mentioned the birth and death dates of records from 1867 to 1908. Now, some archives have restrictions on how far back you can access without having to prove direct descendancy. Is that the case for your archives?
So we have everything that we have in our archives accessible online. For Ohio, they just didn't require you to keep birth and death records prior to that 1867 time frame. So some of the there might be some counties within Ohio that have birth records older than that, or birth and death records. But for our department, because it wasn't a requirement, they just did not keep them. So 1867 is really the jumping off point for birth and death records in the majority of Ohio.
Okay, kind of a follow-up question to that. I know you said that it's a long-going project to digitize everything you have. If you had to give a rough estimate, I don't expect an exact estimate, but if you had to give a rough estimate of how much of your collection is digitized, about what would that be?
So for our historic records, because the majority of digitizing that, for instance, our microfilming department does is for newer records, I would say for the majority of historic stuff, maybe about a quarter of our books are digitized. We have a really nice book scanner. And then honestly, we have not even scratched the surface of loose leaf historic records, unfortunately. I would say that the naturalization collection and the old common pleas probate, or the old common pleas estate records will be one of the first full collections that we will have digitized. Just because they're so time consuming to scan the front and backs of all those teeny tiny little pieces of paper. But the reason like I said, the reason that we made that a priority is because that is one of our most useful records for doing genealogical research. And it's also one of our largest accessed collections as well. So unfortunately for loose papers, we have not even kind of gotten close. We've managed to index more things and create an index so we can scan them upon request versus actually getting those documents scanned.
So would you say less than 10% of your entire collection?
Of loose papers, or yeah, overall probably, yes.
Yeah, and that seems about par actually, from I've asked the same question to other guests, and it seems like it's just an ongoing thing that's going to take a very, very long time.
Right. Well, and once we get those documents scanned, we want to make sure that we're adding all of the correct metadata and stuff to them. So the whole process is just very time consuming. The nice thing is once we get them digitized and all the metadata updated, we have a really good IT department for our county archives that will put those online for us. So we're very fortunate to have them.
Understood. Okay. Now, Susan asked in the chat box, when the county creates the retention rules, is genealogy research ever considered as a factor in retention?
So it is. That is one of the key factors on any retention schedule that we have. Is we always consider historic, like long-term use of those records. Most of those rules are set by the state. So they already kind of have a guideline for what is and isn't kept. I know right now it's kind of a hot button topic about birth and death records. Various people, depending on what your background is, have various appreciation for keeping the physical documents of those things long term. So it's always a debate about what is useful, because certain people might consider newer digitized records the most useful way to keep them long term. As archivists, we always lean towards keeping important records in their physical form long term. But yeah, historic preservation is always one of the things we consider before disposing of records.
Yeah, you know, a lot of lineage societies and heritage societies require original copies of original documents rather than extracts or indexes. So yes, I can definitely appreciate the value of original source documentation. Yeah, as a librarian, I'm constantly torn between, weeding and keeping,
Right.
there's only so much space, so you have to sometimes make tough choices, but I can appreciate that archivists go through the same dilemma. Let's see here. Anybody else here in the class? That was an interesting presentation. You can either unmute your microphone if you'd like and ask Jenifer directly, or if you'd like, you can put it in the chat box. So let's give it a few more moments here.
Jenifer, this is Elizabeth. I noticed that you all are kind of on the border of Indiana, and that's where I have family members. Do you all have a lot of Indiana records as well?
We do not. So the only records that we keep here are specifically Warren County government records. That would be a great thing for our genealogical society to ask them, because there were a lot of people, as Ohio and the Northwest Territory was settled, they would start here and kind of migrate that direction. So we do have a lot of people that were kind of like here just for a little bit of time and then moved on to Indiana. Our genealogical society would have the best like all-encompassing stuff if that is the situation with your ancestor, if they started here and kind of went west from here, because they can gather information that is outside of our county government records.
Thank you.
Question.
What is the name of the genealogical society?
So it is the Warren County Genealogical Society, and they are one of the people I listed on my list of resources. So I listed their website along with their phone number.
Thank you.
They're amazing.
Okay, anybody else? We'll give it just a few more moments. Either put it in the chat box, any questions you might have, or unmute your microphone.
Well, and as I said earlier, we are constantly updating what we have on our website. So if you are interested in getting those notifications, we put those on our Facebook page. So if you wanted to keep up with what we have available, that's always a great place to go.
I like the idea of your blog.
Yeah, so we try to do a little bit deeper dive on some of the things. I didn't go through our blog just because it's more just sharing of what we find. We also have a list of resources on there for our teachers. And then we have images and information about our exhibits on there as well.
Do you mind showing the blog for just one moment?
Sure. Maybe. So we just, while we're doing research, we have various topics that we'll run into that we do more information on. This one of my coworkers found information about this brewery that existed. So provided some background on that. We have our about page, which will provide information about the archives. We have a current exhibits tab. So our most recent exhibit is on, it was a local mill town that was created specifically just for this factory within Warren County. So we have a current exhibits, and then we also have a past exhibits where you can see some of the past exhibits that we've created. This one in particular is about a local community called Foster's Crossing, known for the smoking chimpanzee. And then we did one on our Silver Street jail, which has helped us convince our county that they need to maintain that building, because while the county still owned the building itself, they didn't have any electric or water on in the building, so it kind of fell into disrepair. So that is now slated to be preserved, which is awesome. And then we did one on our county infirmary. And the cool part about that is, while doing research, we found out that there was a time capsule in that building that no one remembered about. So we were actually able to open the infirmary time capsule in 2016 when it hit 100 years old. So that's pretty cool. And then we also, as I said, we have a page for teachers and students. This I am working on updating to be more in line with COVID friendly activities. So yeah, that is our blog.
Okay, I got to ask, what was in the time capsule?
So we found that in our commissioner's journals, where they appointed the person to gather the box in the contents, and it contained, so that was the third installation of our infirmary. The other ones had burned to the ground. So it had information about the building and about the people who helped build the building. Probably the coolest thing that was in there was a letter from the superintendent's daughter to the people opening the box in the future. Because in our infirmary, the superintendent and his family would live in the building with the patients. So their daughter was 23 at the time. And at the bottom of the letter, she essentially made it sound like she was the oldest unmarried woman ever, which is pretty funny. And then she said if she hadn't dried up and blowed away, that we should get together for a talk fest. So yeah, it was really cute. And she had put a whole bunch of photographs in there, but over time they completely ate each other and liquefied and turned moldy. So unfortunately, none of those survived. But I'm glad the letter did make it through. So we put a new time capsule in there, and we had everyone in our department write a letter about the time capsule and what that process was like and how we help give back to the community. So we made sure to include letters in our box.
I love that idea. Absolutely love it. Okay, last chance, class. Any last minute questions before we say thank you and let her go on with her workday? Okay, Jenifer, I assume then that there's no other further questions. So I want to say thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and your time. And thank you also for letting us record today's session. And it'll be appearing on our school YouTube channel probably in just a few more weeks. And so with that, let's see here. Oh, people are little clapping icons in the chat box. So we'll say thank you for that. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.